Hey everyone, it's Ellen here, and today I thought it would be fun to switch things up a little bit. I'm not feeling super great today, so I thought it would be the perfect opportunity, instead of doing a tutorial, to kind of address another question that I've gotten from a few of you over the years. Those of you who don't know, I did teach myself how to play the guitar, and so for those of you who do know that, you've asked me before, how did I do it? What are some tips that I have for you guys? Was there any special, websites or things that I went to? So I thought it would be fun to kind of just sit back and do a really low-key kind of talking to you guys vlog style video about how I taught myself guitar and my musical journey in general. So if this is something you're interested in, then go ahead and grab your snacks, grab your coffee, and let's go ahead and chill out, and I'll tell you guys a little bit about my music background and how I taught myself guitar. So before we jump into the guitar part of this story, I do think that it's important for me to tell you guys about my musical background. So you guys need to know that guitar was not my first musical instrument, and I think that my previous music background really largely helped me to teach myself to play guitar. So that's only fair for me to just go ahead and tell you guys that. When I was about 3 or 4 years old, my mom and dad started me on the violin, and that was actually my very first instrument that I ever learned to play. I had private lessons once a week with several violin teachers throughout my childhood, and we talked about everything from how to stand properly and how to hold your violin properly, to the names of the strings and how to read music and things like that. So that kind of transferred all the way through my high school years. I was in orchestra my middle school and high school years. Basically what I'm trying to say is the violin really gave me a solid foundation of understanding music that I really think helped me to be able to teach myself guitar. So if you're coming from a place where you don't have any musical background and you just want to pick up guitar, I will tell you, I think it might be a little bit harder for you than it was for me, because I did have more background knowledge and more experience with music in general, and I really do think that that helped me propel my learning in guitar and stuff. So things that I learned from playing the violin, one of the biggest things was learning how to read sheet music, knowing things like, the different clefs, the different time signatures, the different key signatures, what a scale is, different music note lengths and stuff like that. Those are all things that were very basic music foundation things that I learned through violin, that I learned through orchestra, that really helped me understand music, not just with stringed instruments and my violin, but with orchestra, with band, with choir. It really helped with just music in general. So I do want to just put out that disclaimer that I didn't just pick up a guitar one day and learn everything from scratch. I did know a lot about music to begin with. Basically, I learned violin when I was really young. By the time I got to middle school and high school, violin kind of became my entire life. So I don't know how much of this is picked up through the camera, but I'm a very socially awkward person. I don't really make friends very easily and things like that. So throughout my life, during the summers when I didn't have any friends to hang out with, when my parents were at work all night, I really ended up retreating into music. That was kind of my thing that I went to, that I enjoyed and stuff. And so throughout middle school and high school, I would write music and things like that, and I would play songs on my violin. I think at one point, I think this was probably about 7th grade, I begged my parents to buy me a keyboard so that I could teach myself piano. My brother had gotten a giant book of all sorts of piano music for Christmas one year, and he didn't really have a super big interest in learning the piano, but I did, because I loved music. So my parents finally got me a keyboard one Christmas, and I just sat there and I taught myself how to play piano. Now I just want to give another disclaimer, I'm not good at piano at all, by no means, but I can read the sheet music. I do know kind of how to play the 2 different hands, and I know the bass clef, the treble clef, and all that kind of stuff. So as far as music knowledge goes, I do have that foundation in place. But what I found really difficult about piano from violin was that you had to simultaneously use both of your hands to play those notes. And so with violin, you're only using your left hand to play the notes while your right hand is with the bow. And so the bow is more like rhythm, I guess, and then the left hand, that's where the notes come from. But with the piano, both hands are in charge of the notes, right? Like you've got your melody with your right hand and you've got the harmonization with your left hand. And for some reason, that was always really hard for me to kind of just be able to play. And so about a year, 2 years after I was trying to teach myself piano, I got to the point where I could play certain songs like Fur-Elise by Beethoven or The Entertainer by Joplin, you know, things like that. I was able to play some really recognizable songs, and the trick that I loved about this was that I could bust those songs out. I still have them memorized to this day. If you sat me in front of piano, I could play those songs for you, and you would think that I know how to play piano, but it's really deceiving because I really don't. My ability to play piano is like nil. Okay, so anyways, it was shortly after that that I decided I wanted to learn guitar. So something else I should backtrack that you should know is that while I was learning all of these instruments, my brother was as well. So when I started on violin at around 3 or 4 years old, my brother's about 5 years older than me, so he was about 8 or 9 years old. And so my parents started us both on violin at the same time. And you know, they quickly realized that I kind of had more of a drive to learn it. So by the time my brother was in high school and I was in middle school, this is when I'm trying to teach myself piano. My brother actually joined his little friend's like band thing, and that's when he decided he wanted to learn guitar. Like he thought it was a cooler instrument than violin and things like that. Never showed any interest in piano, so he wanted to learn how to play the guitar. And so I don't know what his music journey is. I never actually asked him, but I know that through him and his high school friends, he did learn basic chords on the guitar and things like that. And I remember, you know, sitting in my room during the summers and hearing through the wall him playing, I don't remember, like Kryptonite, I think it was, by Nickelback maybe? I'm not actually sure, but I remember him practicing that song. This was like early 2000s, and he would play it over and over again, and I thought it sounded really cool and stuff. So he had an electric and an acoustic guitar. Anyways, a few years pass. I'm now in high school. My brother has moved to China for a few years, and he's left all of his guitars in his room. So while I'm in high school during the summers, again, there's not really much for me to do. I don't really hang out with my friends too often. So I decide I want to learn how to play the guitar because, you know, why not? Let's add another instrument to my little cornucopia of instruments that I can play. So I snuck into his room, and he had 2 guitars. He had an electric and he had an acoustic. I was immediately drawn to the acoustic. I'm not sure if it's because it was that wood, you know, look. Maybe it reminded me of my violin. Not really sure, but I had absolutely zero interest in his electric guitar. So I immediately went to the acoustic, and I remember he had a little wall mount where, you know, it has the little stand that like you screw into the wall, and he had hung his guitar there. And I remember I was afraid to touch it because I wasn't sure, like I didn't know if maybe he was gonna get mad at me. I don't know what I was thinking. So I go through and I just strum the, you know, strings just once. I just touched it, and I remember the sound. I know for sure it was out of tune because it did not sound good, but after strumming it though, there was something about the ringing of the guitar, the acousticness of it, I'm not really sure, but something just was awesome. Like I strummed it once and I was just like, wow, I really like the way that sounds. Like some people, when you think of violin, I know this is like really common. A lot of people think violins are ugly and screechy and really high notes and things like that. A lot of people don't like the violin, but something about this guitar, as soon as I strummed it, even though it was out of tune, it sounded so rich and beautiful, and I just really wanted to learn how to play it. So at that point, this was again summer of probably my sophomore year of high school, I started sneaking into his room. He had all sorts of guitar books. There was, you know, like the Disney books, or there was like the classic guitar songs books and things like that. I think he even maybe had some scales books about guitar, but you know me, like I didn't want to learn scales. I wanted to learn something fun and cool, and so I didn't look at any of those. I remember grabbing the Disney guitar book and just looking through it, and it's one of those books where it has the lyrics so you can have your singer. It also has, you know, the piano notes, the sheet music for it, and then on top of it, it had like the guitar chords and stuff. And so I remember I was really excited. I love Disney. I wanted to learn some Disney songs, but the thing about Disney songs is they are amazing for a reason. There's lots of chords, there's lots of key changes, there's lots of minors and diminished and, you know, all sorts of things, like lots of sharps. And as a beginner guitarist, basically with zero experience at that point, those were very intimidating because I would look up the chord charts within the book, and like at the time, bar chords in that book, it was denoted with a little, you know, curved line where you would bar across all the strings. And of course now I know what that means, but back then I was thinking with violin terms, and in violin sheet music, what a little curved line means is a slur. And so that has a lot to do with how you play something with your bow. And so for me, it was just very confusing. I was like, why would you slur the same note? Like, I was very confused about how to read guitar chord charts and all of that kind of stuff. So the only thing that he had that I feel like really helped propel me in my ability to teach myself guitar, he had this little deck of cards. And I remember it was just so compact and so cool. You would bust out all of the little cards, and on the front side of each card, it showed you a chord and how to play it. It had the fingers numbered so you knew which finger to put where, that kind of stuff. And then on the back of the card, it had chords that, you know, go along with this chord. So say you have the G chord card, it would say like G chord, show you how to play it. And then on the back side, it would be like chords that, you know, are recommended to go with this would be like C or like E minor and things like that. Anyway, so he had a whole deck of these cards. I don't know how many there were, and I remember like looking through them. Some were really hard, it looked like, and some were relatively easy, like E minor. I remember really quickly picking that up really fast. I can't really remember for sure, but I'm like fairly certain E minor was the very first chord I ever learned on the guitar. So basically what I did was I took his little deck of cards and I started separating them into how many fingers. So here's all the chords that take 2 fingers to play. Here's the ones that take 3. Here's the one that takes 4, or like has that weird slur bar line thing. Like, I don't know what to do with those, so I just kind of slid those away. And I focused on the 2 finger chords. And so I knew E minor, and I started looking through the cards. I was like, oh, does anything go with E minor? And from there I would try to play the next one. So I think like A7 was also another 2 finger chord. So basically that's how I started teaching myself the chords, is I had them separated into little piles. I started with chords that require only 2 fingers, and I just started teaching them to myself. One thing that I did remember not understanding at first was the frets, and how if you have the chord chart, sometimes it would say like what fret it was starting at. It's really hard to explain, but like some of them were really hard to understand. But I basically stuck with all of the really easy chords to get. So, you know, E minor, A7, and stuff like that. Then I went into my next little pile, which had the chords that only require 3 fingers. And so I think I learned things like D and G and stuff like that, you know, A. And so basically, once I had kind of a good foundation of some of the more basic chords, what I did was I would turn these cards around for the chords that I knew, like E minor, A, C, G, that kind of stuff. And I would look at the suggested chord progression orders that would say on the back of the card. And my interest at this point was to write my own songs. Like, I didn't really have a super big interest in playing covers at the time. I wanted to basically accompany myself so that I could sing songs that I've already written at this point, that I could just kind of imagine what it would sound like on the guitar. So I had to kind of like frame my mind as in, this is the song that I want to sing that I, you know, wrote, and this is what I hear it being like, so now I need to find the chord that matches the tones that I'm hearing. It's very complicated. So anyways, my whole intention with learning these certain chords was just so that I could accompany myself, but then I realized very quickly that the chords that I was hearing in my head were not the ones that I knew how to play, if that makes any sense. So at that point, that's when I went back to the Disney book and looked through, and it started to make a little bit more sense, right? I was like, oh, there's E minor, like I know that chord. Oh, there's a C, I know that chord. And so then what I did was I went through the Disney book and looked for some songs that only had more easier chords. And like I said, with Disney, some of those songs are very complicated, but you can usually find at least one verse or one chorus that only has a few chords in it. So what I started doing at that point is I would take the cards with the little chord charts, lay them out, and then open the Disney book to whatever song I wanted to play. And, you know, I would just go there and like strum, like I always tell you guys in my tutorials, I would just do one down strum and then sing the melody line and just kind of keep accompanying myself. At that time, just being able to do that was so gratifying, just to know that like, you know, I was singing like Pocahontas or whatever, and like I could play certain chords to go along with what I was singing at the time. Something that I do remember doing is sometimes I would find a song that I almost knew all the chords of, but there would be a few chords that I had no idea about, and literally I would just skip those. I would just play the G that I knew and then skip the next one that I didn't know and then play the A that I knew and things like that. So if that is something that you are, you know, looking to do right now, then, you know, it's okay, I think, to skip around to kind of build your own confidence, but eventually you do need to come back around and learn those things that you find difficult. So for instance, bar chords, I know that's something a lot of you guys are having trouble with, but eventually if you do want to take guitar seriously, there's no getting around it. You will have to learn how to do bar chords and things like that. So if you are getting discouraged, it's okay to skip those for now, but I would definitely say when you feel more confident in yourself to go back and push yourself to learn things that are hard for you. But anyway, back to my story. So at this point, I was able to play some of these Disney songs that had the easy chords that I recognized. So now that I knew some basic open chords and, you know, how to play rhythm guitar, I do remember that before my brother went to China, he was learning Tears in Heaven by Eric Clapton, and I do remember that being a beautiful song, and I wanted to learn it too. And so at this point, so this is maybe like a year later after I had been just playing open chords for like a year and like writing songs with open chords, I finally decided to go on the internet. So this is probably 2008, so I'm probably like a freshman in college now. So yeah, the internet obviously exists, but it's not as prominent as you would think now. Does that make sense? Like, I feel like people now, if they would want to learn guitar, it's just a no-brainer. Go to Google and type in guitar lesson and see what videos show up and things like that. But I feel like at this time in 2008, that wasn't as common, or at least I didn't know if it was common or not. UltimateGuitar.com, that was around. I do remember that because I would go to UltimateGuitar.com to look up pop songs. You know, at that time, I think it was stuff like, you know, Leona Lewis, Bleeding Love, things like that. So I wanted to learn those songs, and that's where I went to Ultimate Guitar to look up those chords. And by this time I had already gotten a pretty solid foundation of a lot of the open chords. I was still working on things like F and B minor and those other bar chords, but in general, I would say all the chords that I know now were largely memorized and known back, you know, 12 years ago in like 2008. So it didn't take me super long to learn all of the open chords. I think if you're struggling with that, it literally is just muscle memory and practice. So the more you take time out of your day to practice those chords, the more you'll remember how to play them, if that makes any sense. Your body will just naturally remember where those fingers go the more you practice. So that's something that I definitely was able to achieve by about my first 1.5 years of guitar. So anyways, going back to the story, I was able to look up the Tears in Heaven song on Ultimate Guitar, but now what I saw was not open chords. What I saw was all these little dashes, all these little numbers and things like that, and it said guitar tab. And I was like, what's a tab? Like, I thought I was just gonna get a list of chords to play Tears in Heaven, but it was a tab. And so now hopefully you guys all know what a tab is. If you want me to do a TMT on how to read tabs, make sure to leave that comment below and I can do that for you guys. But anyways, this was my first experience seeing a tab on screen. So I was just like, what do all these numbers mean? I mean, at that point, it was kind of easy for me to just realize what it meant and have the ability to read the tabs, except for certain things like mutes and hammer-ons, pull-offs. I didn't know what any of that was yet, but I did understand that the number on the tab corresponded to which fret and which string you would be on the guitar. So I remember it took me quite a while, but I was finally able to learn Tears in Heaven by Eric Clapton through UltimateGuitar.com, through that guitar tab that was listed online, and I don't really know how to explain it. I literally just taught it to myself. Like, I don't think, you know, there was no like how to read guitar tabs or anything. It was just pretty straightforward because whoever had tabbed it had left the E, A, G, D, B, E, you know, sideline. So I knew that those corresponded to the strings, and then it just made sense in my head that the number corresponded to the fret. Anyways, so that's how I learned first about tabs. At this point, my brother was coming back from China. It was 4 years later, and I wanted to show him. I was like, look at this, I can play Tears in Heaven like you and stuff. And that's when we did our cover of Tears in Heaven back like 12, 13 years ago on my channel. And yeah, the rest is history. Basically, that's the whole story. I wanted to learn guitar. I had already had a little bit of music experience with violin and then teaching myself piano. One thing I didn't mention is I was also in choir briefly in high school and in middle school, and that kind of taught me, you know, things like solfege and things like that, but I had already known most of what I learned in choir from orchestra. So yeah, when I was about 13, 14 is when I decided I wanted to learn guitar, snuck into my brother's room, used all of his guitar stuff that he had bought while he was away in China, taught myself guitars first by learning the open chords, and then by going into things like tabs, starting slow with just one strum, and then kind of building up my strumming patterns, because, oh, that's something I didn't mention, but in the little Disney book and some of the other guitar books, it did have a suggested strumming pattern with the little down and up arrows and things like that. And like, again, because of my music experience, rhythm and stuff like that came pretty easily to me, so I didn't really have to struggle too much with learning how to read the rhythm, because it did show you how the rhythm would go with music notes. So I was able to kind of clap out the rhythm and then do it on my guitar. If you ever want me to show you how I did any of this, please let me know and I can show you exactly how I did it. But yeah, basically open chords, things like that. Played guitar while I sang along to myself, and then eventually learned what a tab was, figured out how to read a tab, and that is my guitar story. Since then, I've been posting videos teaching you guys different songs that I thought, you know, were easy. I know, like, what happened was I had started posting covers on my channel, and one time I posted a cover and had me playing my guitar to accompany myself, and someone had asked in the comments, how did you play that? Can you show us? And at that point I had, like, I don't know, 10 subscribers, so I was like, sure, let me show you how to play it, and the rest is history, you know? And so, yeah, that's how I got into guitar. That's how I got into teaching guitar. And so let that be known to you guys that I was never properly trained. I was never technically trained. So again, there's a lot of things, there's a lot of knowledge that I know that I'm lacking in guitar. I know that I should have probably learned scales and I never did. To this day, I still have trouble remembering the names of the strings because that's just not something that I ever worked on, you know? Like, my main concern when I learned guitar was being able to accompany myself when I was singing. So a lot of the foundational things that I feel like I should have probably learned, I totally skipped because I didn't care about them. I'm just going to be completely honest with you, didn't care about them. Now that I am teaching a larger audience, I do feel the responsibility of needing to know myself what things are called and what techniques are useful and how to do those techniques completely correctly and things like that. So lately I have been finding myself, you know, researching how to do certain things a certain way so that I can teach it to you guys correctly, because I'm past the point now where I can just be like, hey, like, this is how I taught myself, let me teach it to you how I learned it, because I do feel like there's a responsibility put on me now that I do need to teach you guys the correct way and everything. So just know that that's something that I'm working on going forward. I realize that there's stuff that I'm lacking knowledge in myself. I am trying my best to teach that to myself as well, and I'm using resources like Justin Guitar is a great one, and Marty Music is another great one. And so I've been looking at them and seeing how they teach guitar, like foundational things. And so I will be keeping that in mind moving forward, that, you know, you guys should keep that in mind too. Like, I'm just you. Like, I'm just you, but a few years later. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just a girl who wanted to learn how to play guitar and taught myself guitar, and I don't know everything about guitar, and that's okay, you know? Like, I know what I know, and I will share that information with you. And as I realize how much you guys care about really knowing how to play the guitar and really learning all those foundational things, I am going to take it upon myself to learn that as well so that I can teach that stuff to you guys. So anyways, I'm starting to lose my voice, so I guess I should end the video now. Thank you so much for joining me for this little vlog chat history lesson, a little bit about me kind of thing. I hope that it helped you. I hope that it encouraged you to know that, you know, wherever you are, whoever you are, however old you are, like wherever you are in the world, like if you're starting guitar right now today and you feel discouraged, don't feel discouraged. It's gonna be a long process. It's literally been almost 16 years for me, and I just now today am telling you guys I don't know everything about guitar, and I don't know a lot. I know I don't know a lot of stuff about guitar, so it's okay to not know everything about guitar, and it's okay to not be successful at every attempt that you try. So just keep that in mind, keep yourself encouraged, stick with what you do know at first, you know, so that you can like build that confidence within yourself, and just keep in mind why you want to learn guitar. Basically, like remember how much joy it brings you, if it does, how much happiness it brings you, how proud you are of yourself when you finally do learn something. Keep those kinds of things in mind while you're on your music journey. And yeah, if you guys have any other questions about anything I talked about today, or if there's something I didn't really cover or that you didn't understand, make sure to leave it in a comment below and I'll make sure to get back to you. And like I said, if there's anything that you weren't able to understand by just me talking about it, let me know and I can do a follow-up video that really shows you guys, you know, my process and things like that. Anyways, thank you guys for watching. I hope that this was fun or entertaining or helpful or encouraging or something. If not, I'm sorry. But thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.